The mother could not say when the nights began to turn. She only knew that she had stopped sleeping with the lights off. She sat across from me with her hands folded too tightly, a woman in her 40s, and she told me her son had begun waking at the same hour each night, 3 in the morning, every night. He would sit up in the dark and stare at the foot of his bed and say there was someone there. He was 9 years old. She had checked the locks. She had checked the windows. She had taken him to a doctor, and the doctor had given her a word that explained nothing: night terrors. She did not believe it. A mother knows the difference between a child's fear and a child's certainty, and her son was certain. He told her, in the flat voice of a boy describing the weather, that the thing at the foot of his bed was patient, that it watched him fall asleep, that it liked the room. She came to me because a priest she trusted had run out of answers and had given her my name. She sat there and asked me the question I have been asked 1,000 times in 30 years: what is in my house? I did not answer her that day. I asked her to describe the room. My name is Father Chad Ripperger. I am a Catholic priest. I was trained formally and under obedience in the ministry of exorcism, which is the oldest and most reluctant office the Church possesses. I did not seek it. Few who are honest about it ever do. I have spent the better part of my life in the confessional, at the bedsides of the dying, and in rooms where things happen that the modern world has agreed by silent treaty not to discuss. I am a Thomist by training, which means I distrust drama and I distrust my own feelings and I look for causes. I tell you that because what I'm about to describe is not a ghost story, it is a pattern. I have seen it enough times to name it. And the pattern almost always begins in the same place. It begins in the room where a person lies down, lowers his guard, closes his eyes, and surrenders consciousness for a third of his life. We do not think of sleep as a doorway. The tradition always did. And there is one thing that the families I help most often have in the room and most often will not part with, and it is the reason I am speaking to you tonight. So let me tell you what I found when I asked her to describe the room. She described an ordinary room, a bed against the wall, a window, a small bookshelf, toys in a bin, and then, almost as an afterthought, she mentioned the gift. A relative had given the boy something months earlier. She called it a game. It had come from a shop she did not know, and the relative had thought it charming, and the boy had been delighted, and it had gone onto the shelf in his room and stayed there. I asked her what it was. She hesitated. It was a board, she said. A board with letters on it and a little pointer, the kind you slide. She had not thought anything of it. It was sold as a toy. It was marketed to children. It had a cheerful box. And it had been sitting on a shelf 3 feet from her son's pillow for the better part of a year, and she had never once connected it to the hour of 3 in the morning, because no one had ever told her there was anything to connect. This is the first thing I want you to understand. The objects that cause the most trouble do not announce themselves. They are wrapped in plastic. They are sold beside the dice and the playing cards. The packaging is the camouflage. I asked her one more thing before she left that first day. I asked her whether anything else in the house had changed when the nights began. She thought. She told me the boy had grown quiet at meals, that he had stopped wanting the door closed at night, and then, a month later, had begun insisting it stay open, as though he were listening for something in the hall. She told me the family dog would not go into the room. The animal would stand at the threshold with its ears flat and refuse the doorway. And for 400 years, the church provided the laity with specific prayers to address situations in their homes that they could not explain. Most parishes stopped teaching them after 1965. Now, they have all been compiled into a concise, practical guide. Keep it near the door and read the first page tonight. You will find the link to get the book in the description and in the first pinned comment. They had laughed about it at first, the way families do, and then they had stopped laughing. None of these things by themselves proves anything. I want to be careful here. A quiet child is usually a tired child. A dog is a dog. But I have learned over many years to listen for the small details of family reports almost by accident, the ones they do not think matter, because the things that matter most are rarely the things people come in wanting to tell you. They lead with the dramatic. The truth is usually in the aside. I told her to bring the boy to me, and I told her gently not to touch the board, not to throw it out in a panic, not to do anything until I had seen the child. Because the object is not the disease. The object is the open door. And you do not heal a man by slamming a door he has already walked through 100 times. You have to deal with what came in. I have seen families burn the thing on the first night in fear and feel better for a day and then find the trouble worse because they treated the symptom and left the wound. The order matters. First, you find out what has happened. Then you close the door at its source. Only then does the object come out of the house. To reverse that order is to fight the wrong battle first. When I sat with the boy, I did what I always do first, which is to rule things out. This is the part the films never show. An exorcist spends far more of his life saying no than saying yes. No, this is grief. No, this is illness. No, this is a frightened imagination and a tired family and a house with an old furnace that bangs at night. I have closed far more cases than I have ever opened. I ask about the medical history. I ask the physicians. I ask about the family, the marriage, the losses, the fears. Most of the time, the cause is human, and human causes deserve human mercy, not a ritual. I want to be honest with you about that. I am not telling you that the demonic is hiding behind every bad night and every restless child. I am telling you that there is such a thing as a foothold, and that it is real, and that the church has known how to recognize it for a very long time. The boy was not ill in the way the doctor meant. I watched him. I listened. There was a coldness in how he spoke of the visitor. A child afraid of the dark cries and clings. This child did not cling, he reported. And when I asked him quietly whether he had ever spoken to the thing at the foot of his bed, he said yes. He said he had asked it questions on the board. He said it answered. He said his cousin had shown him how, and that at first it had been funny, and then it had stopped being funny, and now he could not make it stop. He had invited it. He had, in the language of the old manuals, given it a kind of permission. And the room where he slept had become the place it preferred, because sleep is where we are weakest, and the enemy is not stupid. I need you to understand what an invitation is, because the word makes people picture something deliberate, a robed figure and a candle, and that is not how it usually happens. The boy did not think he was inviting anything. He thought he was playing a game his cousin had shown him. That is the whole point. The invitation does not require belief. It requires the act. A man does not have to believe the stove is hot for it to burn his hand. The board is a method of asking, and asking is an act of the will, however idly it is done, and the tradition is clear that the will is the hinge on which the door swings. The boy asked, and asked again, and the asking was the opening. He did not sign anything. He did not understand. And it did not matter that he did not understand, because the door does not check whether you meant it. It only checks whether you... St. Thomas Aquinas wrote more than a dozen questions on how fallen angels operate. Most Catholics have never read one line of it. This archive gathers that teaching, the 1,614 rite, and 4 centuries of documented cases into a single reference. Read it slowly, 1 chapter a night. You will find the link to get the book in the description and in the first posted comment. You opened it. And notice where the opening was made. Not in a church, not at noon, in a child's bedroom, in the evening, in the place, and at the hour set aside for sleep. The enemy did not choose that room by chance. He prefers the bedroom the way a thief prefers the unlit street. Here I have to teach you something, because without it the rest of this will sound like superstition, and it is not. The human person is body and soul together. We do not think with a disembodied mind. We think through the imagination, through images, through what the senses have gathered and stored. St. Thomas Aquinas spends a great deal of the first part of the second part of the Summa on this, on the passions, on the appetites, on the way the sensitive part of the soul moves us before the will has even spoken. The imagination is not a toy. It is the workshop where temptation is built. The demonic cannot read your thoughts. This is settled in the tradition, but it can act upon the body and upon the imagination. It can stir an image. It can suggest. It can press upon the appetites. the hunger, the fear, the lust, the anger, and wait for the will to follow. And when is the imagination least guarded, least governed by reason, least defended by an awake and praying mind? At night, in the dark, in the minutes before sleep, and in sleep itself. Think of how the day works in your own soul. While you are awake, your reason stands at the gate. A thought comes, an image rises, a temptation presents itself, and the rational will can look at it, weigh it, refuse it, send it away. That is what it means to be governed. But reason tires. As the body sinks towards sleep, the will loosens its grip, the judgment grows soft, and the imagination is left to run with whatever was last placed in it. This is not a strange or mystical claim. You know it from experience. The worry you could manage at noon becomes a monster at 2 a.m. The grudge you had set aside returns and will not leave. The appetite you had mastered all day presses hardest in the dark. The night does not create these things. It removes the guard that was holding them back. And what the demonic understands, and what Aquinas describes in his own sober language, is that a soul whose guard is down is a soul that can be worked upon. Not possessed against its will, not in the ordinary case, worked upon, suggested to, pressed. Think about what that means. The last thing you take into your mind before you lose consciousness is the thing your imagination carries down into the dark with you. The church understood this so completely that she built an entire hour of prayer around it. It is called Compline. It is the night prayer of the church, the last of the canonical hours, and for centuries no monk and no devout household closed the day without it. It ends the day by handing it back to God. Into your hands I commend my spirit. It asks for protection through the hours of darkness. It examines the conscience. It places the soul under guard before the guard of reason goes down. We have largely thrown it away. Most Catholics today could not tell you what Compline is. Their grandparents prayed it. Their great-grandparents would have been astonished to learn that anyone went to sleep without commending the night to God and without a blessed object somewhere near the bed. And it was not only the monks. The custom reached down into ordinary homes in forms simple enough for a tired family and a child who could barely keep his eyes open, the night prayer, the act of contrition before sleep, the blessing of the children by a parent's hand, the sprinkling of holy water at the door, a short examination where the soul asks itself before God what it did that day that it should not have and what it failed to do that it should have. These were not heavy obligations. They took minutes, but they did something the modern bedroom does nothing to do. They ended the day in God's hands rather than in the world's. They placed a guard at the gate before the guard of reason came down. A soul that falls asleep having just confessed its faults and asked for protection is a different soul in a different state than one that falls asleep having just fed for an hour on rage or filth. The tradition knew that. It is we who forgot. That is the second thing I want you to understand. The room is not neutral. What is in it? What is on the wall? What is on the shelf? What is glowing on the nightstand? All of it is the last governor of the imagination before sleep takes over. The old Catholic bedroom was not decorated by accident. There was a crucifix over the bed. There was holy water by the door, blessed by a priest, to be used on rising and on retiring. There was very often a brown scapular worn around the neck, an object tied by promise and tradition to the protection of the Mother of God. There might be a blessed medal, a palm from Palm Sunday, an image of a saint. None of this was sentiment. It was strategy. It was a soul preparing the most defenseless hours of its day. And in the house I am describing to you, the wall above the bed was bare, and on the shelf 3 feet away sat a board that the boy had used to open a conversation he did not know how to end. The church has a book for this. It is called the Rituale Romanum, and the foremost exorcist still revere was promulgated in 1614. It is not a book of spells. It is the opposite of that. It is a book of sober procedure, of warnings against credulity, of insistence that the priest first exclude every natural cause of prayers that command in the name of Christ and never bargain. It assumes what the modern mind has forgotten, that there is an enemy, that the enemy has no power over us except what is given to him, and that the entire posture of the Christian is to give him nothing. The legal language is not mine. It is the tradition's, a foothold, a right, a permission. The enemy is a legalist. He cannot simply take He looks for an opening, a thing freely brought into the home, a door freely opened, a habit freely indulged, and he builds on it the way water builds on a crack. The object in the room is the crack. Sleep is when the water rises. I want to be precise about this doctrine because it is the hinge of everything I am telling you, and because it is the part most often distorted. The enemy is not all-powerful. He is a creature. He was made good and fell, and even fallen he remains a creature, bound by limits set by God. He cannot create, he cannot read the secret of your heart. He cannot force the will of a soul in the state of grace. What he can do is build on what he is given. A right that is granted to him through sin, through an object, through a habit, through a freely opened door, becomes a place he can stand. Remove the right, and he loses the standing. This is why the renunciation matters as much as any ritual. This is why confession is more powerful than any object I can carry into a house. You are not fighting an equal. You are evicting a trespasser whose only claim to the property is the permission you forgot you gave. Withdraw the permission and the claim collapses. He has no other title to the room. And the object, the board, the charm, the thing brought home from a place that worships what we do not, is not magic in itself. It is the document of permission. It is the standing invitation left out on the shelf. As long as it sits there, unrenounced, it says, in effect, you are welcome here. That is why it cannot simply be ignored, and why in this account it could not simply be kept in a drawer. So now you know what I was looking at. A boy who had opened a door through an object sold as a toy, in a room stripped of every protection the church once took for granted, in the hours when the soul is least able to defend itself. And you may be wondering what happened. Let me tell you what happened. We did not perform a major exorcism. I want to be careful and honest here, because the films have taught people to expect spinning heads, and that is not what this was, and not what most of this ministry is. What the boy needed was deliverance and the restoration of grace, and what the home needed was to be cleansed and made Catholic again. With the mother's consent and the boy's, the board was destroyed. Not thrown in a drawer, destroyed with prayer, and the renunciation said aloud, because the renunciation matters as much as the burning. You renounce what you invited. You name it and you reject it in the name of Jesus Christ, and you mean it. The house was blessed, room by room. The boy went to confession, a child's confession, simple and complete. And I will say more in a moment about why that sacrament is the most powerful thing in this entire account. A crucifix went over his bed. Holy water went by his door. His mother began to pray over him at night, her hand on his head, the oldest gesture of a parent in the church. I would like to tell you the change was instant. Sometimes it is. In this case, it was not. The first 2 nights were worse, which is common, because the enemy does not surrender ground he considers his without protest. The boy woke, the mother prayed, she did not run. That is the part I want you to hold on to. She had been given the weapons and she used them, and she did not put them down when the first night did not deliver a miracle. And by the end of the week, the boy slept. Not fitfully. He slept the way a tired child is supposed to sleep. And he woke in the morning and he did not look at the foot of his bed. The visitor had no more door. The room had been taken back. I saw the mother some months after. She told me the dog sleeps in the room now. A small thing. She mentioned it the way she had mentioned the board the first time, almost as an afterthought, and I have learned that the afterthoughts are where the truth lives. The animal that would not cross the threshold now crosses it freely and lies at the foot of the boy's bed, the very place the boy had pointed to in the dark. I do not build doctrine on a dog, but I have noticed over the years that the creatures without our pride are often the first to sense when a room is wrong and the first to know when it is right again. The change in that house was not a feeling. It was a fact you could walk through a doorway. What changed was not that they found a stronger spell. There is no stronger spell. What changed is that they withdrew the permission, closed the door at its source through the sacraments, and stood the old guards back at the gate of the night. The board came out, the cross went up. The boy was returned to grace, and the room, which had belonged to something else, belonged again to God. And here is the first thing I will say plainly, and I will not soften it. There are people who will hear this story and want the object more, not less. There is a hunger in the human heart to know what is hidden, to touch the forbidden thing, to have a private little power that the priests and the parents do not control. I have seen grown adults clutch these objects and refuse to part with them because the secret felt like theirs. If that is stirring in you right now, I am not going to flatter it. I am going to tell you the truth. That hunger is the door. It is the oldest door there is. It is the one in the garden. You will not be the exception. No one is the exception. Let me tell you what this means for you in your own house tonight. The strategy is not complicated, and that is the scandal of it. The protections that work are the ordinary ones the church has always offered, and they have been hiding in plain sight while people went looking for something more exotic. There is no secret prayer. There's no special object more powerful than the ones a priest can bless this week for free. The whole of it comes down to grace, and grace has ordinary channels, and the enemy hates the ordinary channels precisely because they are available to everyone. Begin with confession. I told you I would return to it. When the Lord breathed on the apostles after the resurrection and said, "Whose sins you forgive are forgiven them," he was not speaking poetry. He was instituting a sacrament. Confession is not a conversation about your feelings. It is the application of the blood of Christ to a specific soul through the ministry of the church, and it does something that nothing else does. It removes the foothold. It cleans the crack the water was building in. A soul in the state of grace is not an easy house to occupy. I have watched the entire weather of a person's life change after one honest confession of sins held back for 30 years. The enemy fears that sacrament more than he fears any rite I perform, because that sacrament is where the door is closed at the source. Then the Eucharist, received worthily. I add those words deliberately, because to receive the Lord in mortal sin is not protection, it is a second wound. But to receive him in grace is to take into your own body the one the demons could not look upon. There is no stronger thing you can do. And around these two sacraments, you build the rest. Let me name the rest plainly, because people nod along at the word sacramental and then keep none of them, and a weapon left in the drawer has never won a fight. Holy water by the bed and used not as decoration, but as a weapon on rising and retiring with the sign of the cross. A crucifix over the bed, blessed, where the eyes fall last at night and first in the morning. The brown scapular, if you take up its promise rightly. The rosary, the mother's prayer, which has broken more sieges than any army. And the night prayers your grandparents knew. The examination of conscience before sleep, in which you ask the Lord, honestly, where the day went wrong, and you hand it to him before you close your eyes. This is what it means to commend your spirit into his hands. This is Compline made small enough for a family. None of that requires me. That is the point. The deliverance ministry is a small and sorrowful corner of the church's life, and most of you will never need an exorcist and should pray you never do. But every one of you needs the sacraments, and every one of you sleeps, and every one of you has a room. The question is, what governs that room in the last waking minute of your day? Which brings me to why this is happening now, more than it did in numbers I would not have believed when I began. Consider the modern bedroom. The crucifix is gone from the wall. The holy water is gone from the door. The night prayers are gone. The examination of conscience is gone. And in their place, there is a small, bright rectangle that the person holds inches from his face in the last minutes before sleep. I am not going to pretend the device is the same as a board used to summon spirits. It is not, and I will not insult your intelligence by saying so. But I will ask you to think clearly about what it does. It is the last input. It is the final thing poured into the imagination before the guard of reason goes down. And what does it pour? For a great many people, it pours violence or rage or the endless scroll of envy and despair. And for a great many, it pours pornography, deliberately, in the dark, alone, in exactly the hour the soul is least able to resist. The appetites are inflamed, and then sleep takes the inflamed imagination down into the night. You do not need a demon to be harmed by that. But you have also, without a single thought, dismantled every protection your ancestors placed around that hour and replaced it with its precise opposite. You have made the gate wide, and you have stood nothing at it. And I want to say a word to the parents in particular, because the device is now in the hands of children at the same hour in the same dark, and there is no crucifix on that wall either. A child lies in bed with a glowing rectangle in his hands and scrolls, alone, past images no child should carry into sleep, and no one has prayed over him, and no one has blessed the room, and the door is left open all night to whatever is on the other side of that screen. I am not telling you the phone is a summoning board. I have said that twice, and I will not pretend otherwise. I am telling you that the structure is the same. An open gate, a defenseless hour, a mind being fed its last meal of the day by something that does not love it. The board and the screen are different in kind. They are not so different in what they do to the imagination at the threshold of sleep. This did not happen by chance, and I am old enough to have watched part of it happen. There was a time within living memory when Catholic children were catechized with care, when the night prayers were taught at a mother's knee, when the sacramentals were in every home and their meaning was understood. After the Second Vatican Council, which closed in 1965, much of that ordinary formation was quietly set aside. I am not here to relitigate the council. I am here to describe what I have seen, which is 2 and 3 generations of Catholics who were never taught the things their great-grandparents took for granted. They do not know what compline is. They do not know that holy water is a weapon. They do not know that an object can carry a foothold. The infrastructure of protection was not destroyed in a single blow. It was allowed to fall into disuse, room by room, house by house, until a mother could keep a summoning board on her son's shelf for a year and never once feel a flicker of warning. The enemy did not need to break down the wall. We took it down ourselves, and we called it progress, and we wondered why the nights got darker. And I will say the second hard thing now, because someone listening needs it. There's a voice that says you are too modern for this, that the holy water and the scapular and the night prayers are the relics of a frightened, unscientific age, and that you, an educated person, are above them. I want you to notice who benefits from that voice. It is not your reason that is speaking. Reason looks at causes and effects, and the cause and effect here are written across 30 years of cases. It is your pride, and pride is not a neutral thing. Pride is the precise sin through which the enemy first fell and through which he prefers to work, because a proud soul will refuse the simple medicine and call its refusal intelligence. Do not be that soul. The humble thing and the wise thing are the same thing here. Take the protection. You are not above it. None of us is. So let me give you the action list, plainly, the way I would give it to a family sitting in front of me. First this week, go through the rooms where you and your children sleep and remove anything tied to the occult. The boards, the cards used for divination, the charms, the objects brought back from places of worship that is not ours, the items you cannot quite explain but kept anyway. Do not agonize over a borderline case. If it is clearly tied to the occult, it goes. Destroy it with a prayer of renunciation. Name what you are rejecting and reject it in the name of Jesus Christ. Second, deal with the screen. I am not telling you to throw it in the river. I am telling you it does not sleep in the bedroom and it does not get the last minutes of your day. Let the last input be a prayer and not a feed. Third, restore the night. Put a crucifix over the bed, blessed by a priest. Put holy water by the door and use it. If you are called to it, take up the brown scapular. Teach your children to pray before sleep and to make a small examination of conscience, asking where the day went wrong and handing it to God. Fourth, go to confession. Not eventually, soon. Make it complete. This is the source, and everything else is built on it. Fifth, receive the Eucharist worthily in the state of grace as often as you are able. Sixth, consecrate your family and your home formally to the Sacred Heart and to the Immaculate Heart of His Mother. A consecrated home has an owner, and the enemy knows whose it is. Seventh, pray the Rosary. As a family, if you can. It is the prayer that has held the line for centuries, and it will hold yours. And last, if any of this has gone beyond what a household can carry on its own, find a sound and orthodox priest, a real spiritual director, and do not go looking for a sensational one. The work is quiet. The men who do it well are quiet. I want to leave you with hope, because I have spent this hour describing a danger and the danger is real, but it is not the last word. The last word was spoken at the resurrection, and it does not change. There was a man named Athanasius who stood almost alone against the whole weight of his age, when it seemed the entire world had gone the other way, and the truth was kept alive by one stubborn soul who would not bend. Athanasius against the world. You may feel that you are one frightened person in a house in the dark, surrounded by a world that has forgotten how to defend itself. You are not alone, and you are not without weapons, and the one you serve has already won. The night belongs to him. The room belongs to him. The moment you give it back. So I will tell you what I tell everyone, and I mean every word of it. Choose Christ. Choose his church. Choose his sacraments. Choose his mother. Choose the cross, and do not look back. In the next account, I will tell you about a different kind of invitation. Not an object on a shelf, but a single sentence, spoken in jest at a table among friends, that opened a door no one at that table believed in. Some doors are made of wood, some are made of words. Stay with me.